Is it recording? I haven't heard the announcement. Recording, it is. Okay. Thank you and welcome to this extraordinary Finance and General Purposes meeting. Firstly, a reminder to attendees, both committee members and the public, that this is a formal meeting. There's no public open session at this meeting. It's a single item agenda, but the meeting is being filmed and all those present are reminded that they are deemed to have agreed to be filmed and the use of those images and sound recordings, and that attendees should not disclose any personal information of individuals, as that would infringe the data protection rights of that individual. And everyone please mute their microphones when not speaking. Okay, apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies? No apologies. Okay, any declarations of interest? First of all, any disclosable or non-disclosable pecuniary interests in the agenda or non-pecuniary interests in the agenda? No. Okay, so we move on to items for consideration then, and this is the paper presented on funding of CCTV strategy and Christmas lights. I'll hand over to the clerk to introduce the paper.
Okay, as the chairman was saying, this is just a single item paper for consideration. The first element that it's seeking to deal with is the gap between those funds that, in principle, the council has drawn down from section 106 and that which is the overall cost of 58,009. There is a slight variation to the information that you have in front of you. I spoke to one of the directors at Central Beds this afternoon just to clarify the situation in regard to CCTV. The first absolute bit of clarity is that there is no additional monies available other than that described within the paper. So that's absolute clarity. The only option for the council effectively is to look at its capital reserves. So from that point, we've got absolute clarity. We've also got some additional information that I wasn't aware of before, which is of the monies that we believe have already been sanctioned, 17,968 has definitely been sanctioned, and 15,112 is to be sanctioned. And that is subject to additional information that the council needs to give to Central Beds about the decision-making process and to evidence good value for money, and that we have done a quantitative assessment of the decision-making by members at the time. Subject to that happening, then the gap remains the same as the paper describes. The second element here is an up to 4K figure. So we know that there is some indicative figures already. This gives, in theory, a maximum allowance that can be drawn down. And it may be that we don't need the maximum allowance in reality. So the overall sums of money involved to draw down from the rolling capital of 71,968 is a total figure of 29,000 at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So just to confirm, but it could potentially be higher than 29,000 in the event that Central Beds don't release that last 15,000. Okay. Well, I'm happy to move the recommendation as it's set out, but I do think we need one last push, not just to get that 15,000, but actually the whole sum of money if we can. I know every channel seems as though it's been exhausted, but there is one remaining channel, which is to escalate politically via executive members at Central Beds Council. And I have it on pretty good authority that that these funds should be released, provided that we are following due process, as I'm sure we are as a council, in terms of getting the right number of quotes, doing our due diligence, having various, adhering to our own financial regulations and those of Central Bedfordshire Council as well. So I'm happy to move it as set out, perhaps with the caveat that if a further 15,000 is needed, that it comes to either council or F&GP, whichever is most appropriately positioned in the calendar, given that we really do want to crack on with this now.
Thank you. So I'll second that general proposal, although I would like to make a couple of comments. So firstly, in relation to the Christmas lights, I believe the arrangement we've had in the past is that we actually rented the lights effectively as part of the service provision, and therefore we weren't exposed to the capital expenditure. I don't think we need to discuss it further in this meeting, but if that is an option going forward to potentially lease or rent the lights over 4 or 5 years as part of a wider agreement, that may be preferable. But if that isn't an option, I would support using reserves in this way. In relation to the matter of the CCTV, I support the proposal to accept the recommendations outlined. I do hope and genuinely expect that Central Beds will agree to fund this through 106, and I think we should put it on record that that is this council's hope and wish. And I have confidence in this council's governance processes. I think, on the other hand, any delay in placing the orders carries a significant risk of increased cost. And I think we've seen, well, certainly heard about an increase in crime in town, and I think there's a risk to the town if we delay this. So I think it's important that we have essentially this approval in place as a plan B or a backup plan in the event that the Central Beds let us down with this. Thank you.
Councillor Strong.
Thank you. I support the proposal. I think it's essential that we get this dealt with as quickly as possible. There's increasing crime. It will help with crime prevention as well as crime solving. The only question I have on the finances is with regard to the Christmas lighting. Are there any alternative sources of funding for such events such as Market Square regeneration and such like, so that there may be alternatives to the rolling capital fund? CCTV we've got to get on and deal with, but I just wonder whether there's any other options with regard to funding the Christmas lighting provision, because it's been welcomed and throughout the town for many, many years now. We want to maintain our standards.
Yeah. We'll certainly look into those alternative funding streams that you've highlighted, and we'll go as wide as we possibly can. But I think a good outcome to the discussion today is that we have an in principle yes, and then we can amend that yes if need be. I would like just to reiterate that and support what Councillor Knight and Phage was saying. In my conversations with Central Beds, I highlighted the urgent need for a decision based on the circumstances we've just described, not least connected to helping us manage crime, vandalism, other perceived elements that are taking place in the town. It's critical that we get this across the line. Yep.
Any further comments before we move to a vote? In which case, we'll move to the vote. So, all those in favour? That's unanimous. So, thank you very much. No other items on the agenda, therefore
Just before we close, Chairman, just a quick question. I assume this goes to full council now for ratification, or because it's a recommendation rather than.
There should be. So this, we've done what we need to do from the finance perspective. There is, I think, a separate. Should be a separate item, I believe, on the agenda for.
Yes.
Somewhere. I believe there is. I don't actually. It's not on the council agenda.
So just about the point of information, can we actually get on with it, or do we have to wait for another full council meeting, because that would be disastrous in view of the timescale?
Well, yeah. So the reason we put this extraordinary meeting in was to allow it to be on the agenda in the meeting immediately after.
Have we got the power to resolve it rather than just make a recommendation?
So I think it's resolved from an FNGP perspective that this is possible, but my understanding was that there was a recommendation from TCM which needed council's approval, which that couldn't then happen unless FNGP had already approved it from a financial perspective, which is why we had this meeting scheduled. So I don't know why it's not on the town council agenda as
So
well.
my concern is we've got a time limit. We need to get this through.
So I believe the mayor has got the power to add items to the agenda if there is due urgency under standing orders.
May I
So I
ask the
would
mayor possibly
maybe
to
suggest he
pass
might
that on
wish to
to
do so.
take that as a matter of due urgency?
I'll take great satisfaction in that, yeah, sure.
Okay, on that note, I close the meeting.